One of the things that became so clear over the last 2 years is that we need each other. And life throws at us so many unexpected things. Even post-COVID, we see in recent days the uncertainty of this world. And for that reason, we need to remember and not forget, even when days seem to be brighter, the things that matter the most. And that is love for God and love for each other. Jesus would say these are the two greatest commands. But I'll tell you something. When we go through uncertain days, it can be tempting to become cynical. Jesus talked about the future in Matthew chapter 24. It's a chapter that many people are revisiting of late, because when we see what is happening on the world stage, people are asking questions like, could the events of the last months and years and days be signs of the end of the world? I'm not entirely certain about that. Jesus would say that it would be an unexpected event, that he would come like a thief in the night, that no one knows the day or the hour, not the Son or even the angels in heaven, but only the Father alone. But I'll tell you, in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus does talk about the future from his perspective, and he says in verse number 12 that in the latter days, people's love will grow cold. I wonder if over the last couple of years, if we've not faced the double collision of recognizing how much we need each other, but at the same time, maybe becoming a little cynical about people around us. In the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, this is where our text will be focusing our minds on this morning, is in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 7 through 12. But the author of this Old Testament book is struggling to find meaning in life. And he goes from one avenue of life to another, coming always to the same conclusion: vanity, vanity. Or meaningless, meaningless. It's all meaningless. I know a lot of us have been doing some really deep soul searching over the last couple of years, perhaps more deeply than we've ever searched before, about what is this life really all about? What really matters? What is most important? And like the writer of Ecclesiastes, we ponder the fact that it seems that even the best things that life has to offer, at the end of the day, feel somewhat empty. And so in the book of Ecclesiastes, the writer ponders the emptiness of selfish living, and how if you focus only on yourself, even though you think you're focused on what you really want, what your desires are, what your needs are, that if you focus on that all the time, you'll find yourself to be empty. He ponders in Ecclesiastes 4 a man who lives a solitary life, and then he comes to a dramatic conclusion that the wise person realizes that life is better when you're with other people. Life is better together. Life is better with companionship. So, we're going to see here in this text how that life done in isolation is not good. I think we've learned that the hard way over the last couple of years. In Ecclesiastes 4 and verse number 7, he says, I observed yet another example of something meaningless under the sun. So again, he's going from one thing to another, trying to find purpose and meaning in life, and it's always a dead end. And he says, I looked at one other thing. I looked at a man who was all alone, without a child or a brother, and yet he works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. In other words, the writer of Ecclesiastes says, I looked at this guy who was working himself to the bone, daylight to dark, trying to find meaning and purpose in what he does, and yet he had ignored relationships. He had no heir. He had no brother. He had no one to share life with. But then he asked to himself, who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It is all so meaningless and depressing. You see, this hard-working man is living a solitary life in isolation, cut off from relationships with other people. He had become self-absorbed, self-focused, and alone. I think we are now living in a time when our culture many people in our culture are desperate for wanting the benefit, the profit of relationships without the investment. It's a great paradox in our culture today that everybody says they want community, everybody says they want meaningful relationships, but very few of us are willing to invest in the accountability and the commitment that it requires. And so people find themselves at a dead end. I mean, the advance of many of these technological wonders that we are the recipients of in our culture today testify to this reality. That you can have a facade of relational connection through social media, where you peer into the lives of other people as if somehow you know what's going on in their life, but you have no personal connection, no personal investment, no accountability, no real connection. And so it starves our soul because relationally we're eating candy that offers some kind of buzz from relational connection, but no real depth of connection. And so we went through a time where, because of the pandemic, we didn't have much of a choice. In many ways, in order to try to protect our physical health, we had to deliberately socially distance from people. Now, it's easy to armchair quarterback that. Hindsight's 2020. We in this room no doubt have lots of opinions about whether or not we should or should not have, or what different choices we may have made, but that's in the past. And what we're at now is at this moment. And I want to suggest to you that while we may have needed to socially distance for our physical health then, we now need to be just as deliberate, just as intentional to re-engage in relationships, to socialize with one another for our spiritual and mental well-being. Now is the time to re-engage. Now is the time to reconnect. Now is the time to put emphasis once again on being together because it's better. In fact, that's what the writer of Ecclesiastes, the conclusion he comes to. He says, two are better. And there are very practical reasons why two are better. He's going to give 4 reasons why that is. In verse number 9, he says, 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other to succeed. So he's saying, look, you're better off in life if you don't go at it alone, but instead you partner with other people. Why? Reason number 1, you'll be more successful in life if you do. In fact, friends will make you more productive. There's been a discovery made, you've heard it talked about probably at your place of business. In the business world, there's a lot of discussion about the power of synergy. Synergy is the idea that rather than 2 plus 2 equaling 4, that in reality, when it comes to productivity, 2 plus 2 can actually equal 5. In other words, you can get more done when you're working together than you could get done by yourself. Two people, the same two people working in isolation. There is power in working together. If you've ever tried to do a home project by yourself, that maybe you're on a ladder and you've got a board and you've got nobody on the other end of the board to hold it up, that's hard work. Maybe you can do it by yourself, but it's harder and it takes longer and it takes more time and creativity to figure out how to get that done. It would be so much easier if you had somebody with you on the other end of the board. Why? Because it's better together. Two are better than one, and you're more productive if you are engaged in meaningful relationships with other people. Secondly, verse number 10, he says, if one person falls, the other can reach out and help, but someone who falls alone is in real trouble. I know that many of you in this room, in fact, I spoke with somebody this morning even that had an accident on a ladder. And you know, if you have an accident, particularly a really bad accident, and there's nobody around to help you, you can be in serious trouble. And that's why two are better than one, because friends can help you whenever you're struggling. I know a lot of us have personally encountered that over the last 2 years. Maybe you had sickness in your home. Maybe you went through a time of real struggle, and there were others that came alongside of you and helped you in your time of need. And you think, man, I don't know how I would have gotten through that if I didn't have friends and church family members and family members that would rally to my side in my time of need. It's just common practical benefit that two are better than one, because friends can help you whenever you're struggling. We need people who can help us get back up when we totally blow it. Not just when we have an accident. But have there been times in your life whenever you realize, you know what, I have really, really messed up. I've made some really bad mistakes. How encouraging and how helpful is it when people that you can trust, that you have relationships with, come alongside of you when you blow it and help you get back up and move further down the road. Verse number 11, he says, likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm, but how can one be warm alone? You see, friends give relational warmth when life is cold. Proverbs 27:9 says, a sweet friendship refreshes the soul. There is great benefit. There's just something about going through life by yourself, if you don't have connections with other people, can be tremendously depressing. And I think we've learned that lesson. We need the warmth of other people to come alongside of us in life. And it makes life so much better. It refreshes the soul when you have that. In verse number 12, a person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. The fourth practical reason why he says two are better than one is that friends can provide defense whenever you're attacked. I don't know about you. I think I probably do. There are probably many people in this room that could give testimony to the fact that maybe you've gone through a season of life where people seem to turn against you. Whenever people were attacking you, maybe unjustly. There have been times in my life when that has happened to me, and it can be extremely defeating when it feels like you're being misrepresented, or your name is being slandered, or you're being gossiped about, and things are being told to other people that are completely untrue. How encouraging is it whenever you've got trusted friends that really know you and know your heart and know your spirit, that will come alongside you and stand up for you when you're being attacked. That's why we need these kinds of relationships. That's why two are better than one, and that's why it's better together. So finally, what the writer of Ecclesiastes comes to is he says, look, I looked at life, I tried to find meaning, and I saw this guy who's trying to live life by himself, and he found it to be meaningless. Guess what? Two are better than one, and there are practical reasons why you need relationships in your life. Well, then the question becomes, how do I get that? How do I create a friendship circle He gives us a clue in the last part of verse 12. 3 are even better. For a triple braided cord is not easily broken. What this writer is saying is that wise people will intentionally weave their life into the lives of others. That you won't go it alone, because one little life lived like a single thread can easily snap under pressure. But if you have made the decision to say, I'm not going to try to go through life just focused on me, but I'm going to intentionally invest in relationships with other people, I'm going to weave my life together with the lives of others, then when life becomes hard and there is pressure under life, you've got more strength to hold underneath the load. So how do you do it? How do you weave your life intentionally into the lives of others? Let's look at a few principles quickly from a broader perspective of Scripture that give us some advice about how to do that. First, you got to live your life sacrificially. In John chapter 15, verses 12 through 14, Jesus is talking about how that we need to abide in Him and have a relationship with Him, and how He came to teach us not only how to know Him, but how that He gave this command that we ought to love one another. We ought to invest in relationships with one another. In fact, then He would go on and say, there is no greater love that anybody could have than this, that you lay down your life for your friends. Now, we often think of that in terms of the fact that Jesus would lay down His life on the cross to sacrifice Himself for our benefit, and certainly He did. Or you might immediately gravitate toward the idea of, well, if push came to shove and I needed to try to, take a bullet for somebody that I love, I would do it. Or throw myself on a grenade for somebody, I would do it, especially if they're a deep friend or somebody I deeply love. But I want you to think about it more than just life sacrifice as far as your physical, literal life. He says, no, there's no greater love. And how you know you truly are being a loving person is when you are willing to lay down your own selfish, self-absorbed life. Lay down your life for others, to live sacrificially. I heard a preacher one time say, when he told a story about teaching a marriage class, and he was talking about how that true agape love is a self-sacrificing love, and that's the kind of love Jesus calls us to have for each other, and most certainly in our marriages. And so he's talking about self-sacrifice and being sacrificial, and there's a guy in the class that speaks up and says, well, yeah, I'd take a bullet for my wife. To which the guy spoke up and said, well, that's great, but will you do the dishes for her? So many times we say when it comes to an extreme situation, I would give my life. But are you giving your life? Are you willing to lay down your life to come alongside of others and say, you're important to me, you're valuable to me. I'm willing to sacrifice my time, willing to sacrifice some of my privacy and individualism, willing to sacrifice some of those things for the benefit of other people. That's the kind of love that Jesus says. So you say, man, I really know that two are better than one, and I really know that life is better together, and I need relationships. This is where you have to start. It's not enough to say, I want that. Don't go around your whole life saying, I want relationships, and then not have the courage to take the steps to do what it takes to have them. And step one is, you got to live sacrificially if you really want to make relationships a priority in your life. Secondly, you got to be willing to take the initiative. In Matthew 5:46, Jesus says, if you only love people who love you, what reward is there? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. So Jesus is saying, no, true love is not just loving people that seem to respond to you. It's like you sit back and wait for somebody to love you and then you reciprocate it. Jesus is saying, no, don't be like that. You take the initiative. You step out there and show demonstrations of love. Again, so many of us want desperately relationships, but we're sitting back waiting on somebody to invite us over, waiting for somebody to invite me into a group, waiting for somebody to reach out to me. And I'm sitting back. How many years am I going to sit back and say, oh, woe is me, I don't have any friends. Oh, woe is me, I don't have any relationships, and not take the initiative to be sacrificial and take the initiative? You can be a magnet for relationships if you'll take a few steps of initiative. Some simple ones, like smile at people when you meet them. Start asking, instead of talking about yourself all the time, ask questions of other people. Most people like to talk about themselves, so you want to initiate relationship, start asking questions. Well, tell me about what you do. Tell me about what you're interested in. Tell me more about that. Ask lots of questions. And perhaps the biggest step of initiative that you could take if you say, I know I need relationships, I want to build a circle of friendships, be hospitable. Start opening your home and have a meal and invite people over. And you'll be amazed at how much mileage that will get you down the road on building relationships if you're hospitable. But also, don't just sit back quietly and ask a bunch of questions and be awkward. Instead, share yourself with others. Take the initiative and contribute to the conversation as well, instead of just sitting back waiting for somebody else to carry the conversation the entire time. So you got to take the initiative if you want a circle of friendship. Then thirdly, build your self-confidence. In Mark chapter 12, verse 31, Jesus says the second commandment, he says the first commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second commandment is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now notice that part, as yourself. I have found in my life, I'll just be transparent with you, it's kind of hard to build a relationship with somebody that seems to always kind of have a defeatist spirit. They're always like a victim, or always kind of withdrawn. You see, it's much easier to build a relationship with somebody that has some degree of self-confidence in themselves. So learn to build your self-confidence by saying, how do I love others? I'm going to love others by loving myself first, learning how to love myself. And you say, how do I do that? By digging into the Scripture and seeing how much God values you. When you build your confidence not on your abilities, not on your talents, not on your personality, but you say, I have something to offer because God believed I was worth it, that He would send His Son to die for me. Find your identity and your confidence in Christ and in what He's done for you, and it will build your self-confidence, and it'll help to build relationships. Needy people, clingy people, negative people, self-absorbed people, victim mentality people, I'm just going to tell you that repels relationships. It repels them. So build your self-confidence, play it cool, don't be weird, and take the initiative and be sacrificial. Friendships, you see, are built on circumstances, on commonality, and on chemistry. Proverbs 18:24 says, there are friends who destroy each other, but a real friend sticks closer than a brother. I find that so interesting, that a real friend sticks closer than a brother. Now, what that says to me, among many other things, at least one thing it says to me, is that there are some relationships that for whatever reason, I feel closer to that person than I do even my own blood kin. You see, there are just some factors where because of common interest or because of being in similar circumstances or just because of some kind of mysterious relationship chemistry that I just seem to gravitate toward and get along with some people better than with other people. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's human. I think that's natural. And there's numerous examples in Scripture of that very thing. David enjoyed, for whatever reason, a depth of friendship with Jonathan in the Old Testament, to the point that he says he loved him even as his own soul. They had some kind of chemistry with one another. Now, some people could stand back and say, well, I don't know why David won't be my friend. Well, it's not that he was being exclusionary. It's just that for some reason, they had a connection. Or, for example, Paul, in the book of Acts, it says that he found a friendship with Aquila and Priscilla. Why? Because they shared a common interest. They were tent makers. And so they had an interest with one another. So you can't force friendships, but you can walk into situations where there are common circumstances, you share commonality, or you have chemistry with some people. Finally, number 5, look for people with open connectors. Let me spend just a moment on this because I think this is very, very helpful. I've been in the church my entire life. I've been in congregations. I've worked in lots of churches in various capacities. And something that I find that happens in every single church, regardless of its makeup, is there are always people that say, there are cliques in this church. It doesn't matter. It's always true. There are certain people that seem to gravitate toward one another. They have similar interest or chemistry. And if you're starved for relationship, you look at that and you wish that you could be a part of it, and you're jealous about it. Proverbs 14, verse number 30, talks about how jealousy is like a cancer that will rot your bones. Jesus himself had 3 close friends, Peter, James, and John. Now, I don't know what the other disciples thought about that. Did Thomas or Matthew, for example, say, well, I don't know why Jesus is always taking Peter, James, and John into Jairus' upper room or up on the Mount of Transfiguration? I didn't get to see that. Maybe there was some of that. I don't know. They were human just like us. But what I want to emphasize here is that Jesus didn't think he was somehow being evil by gravitating toward 3 people and developing deep relationships with them. There was nothing wrong with that. You know, small groups of people have certain shared interests. In fact, I looked up this word clique in the dictionary. And the definition of it is a small group of people who have shared interest, who like to spend time with one another. That's great. Nothing wrong with that so far. Then the next part says, yet they exclude others. Now that's the problem. That last part is the problem. To intentionally exclude other people on purpose, like some kind of infantile high school rivalry, is the sin of factions, which Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 through 21 list among the works of the flesh, that if you continue in those things, you will not inherit the kingdom of God. If you have a prejudice, a racism, if you have a sense where you're not wanting to associate with certain kinds of people out of a sense of wanting to be exclusionary, that is wrong. And we shouldn't make any excuse for it. But there is nothing wrong with having shared interest and spending time with people that you connect with, just like Jesus did. So let me talk to you about these connectors. I read a book several years ago about small groups and relationship building in churches, and this author used this illustration of Legos. He said every person is like a Lego, and you only have a certain number of connectors. We all have a certain bandwidth of relationship. You cannot have depth of relationship with an innumerable amount of people. You can only have a certain depth of relationship with a few people in your life. You've got these relational connectors. So what do you have in a church? In the church, you have some people that are lacking friends, and they have all open connectors like a single Lego. And so they're longing for relationship, but they may look at somebody else that has numerous connectors filled, and they say, well, that's a clique. When it may not be a clique. This group may not be excluding anybody. It's just that they have a natural chemistry and a natural connection. And this person is looking at it and they're jealous. And they long to have it and they want to have it. And I would say that if you want to make friends, don't focus on people who have their connectors full. Instead, look for people in the church that have open connectors. Focus on them and look for them. A person that is a full Lego has all the connectors already full, but you might have somebody that's an open Lego. That is to say, they have some connectors that are full, but many others that are open. And they have some circumstances in life have opened those connectors. So look around you and see people that clearly have some room for relationship investment. Now, some people are new Legos where they come into a church, they have open connectors, and they're hopeful for new friendships. They're longing for new friendships. So I would encourage you that rather than focusing on people that already have full connectors and saying, they're casting aspersions on them and saying, well, that's a clique, or they'll let anybody break in. Look for people around you that are maybe new to the church or people that life circumstances have opened a connector, and look for those people. Focus on those people. And then number 6, be patient. Friendships cannot be forced, and friendships often take time to grow. Ephesians 4 and verse number 2 says, always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowances for each other's faults because of your love. So you got to be patient. If you've been in a church for a while and for whatever reason you're not making those relational connections, pray about it. Look for people with open connectors. Be patient. Ask God to open those doors of opportunity. I know, like in the last congregation that Michelle and my family were a part of, there was a lady there that whenever we moved there, she said that she had been praying for years for a best friend. She had not had that in the church. She didn't have a real best friend. She'd been praying and praying. And after a while, Michelle and her started doing some things together, had some common interest, and before long, God had answered that prayer in an unexpected way, in an unexpected place, and they developed a deep friendship that exists to this day. So, don't underestimate the fact that God will answer prayers if you're persistent and you pray and you ask Him for that. Again, don't focus on what other people have and be jealous about what others have. Take the initiative, pray, and look for people around you that have open connectors in their life, and then invite people over to your home. Be hospitable, be welcoming, be warm, and be patient. And God may just surprise you in ways that you don't expect. In closing, you can't download community. The last 2 years, we had to take emergency measures, which included, us not meeting in person and having worship streamed online. You can have virtual teaching, and there's a lot of that that's available, and that's a blessing. But when it comes to community, the church being a gathering just can't be virtual. You can't download community. You can download content. You can download singing. You can download sermons. But you can't download community. Family is something that requires us to be together. We celebrate together. We cry together. We worship together. We gather around the table together. And why do we do all of that? Because life is better together. So I want to encourage you, make an intentional decision. We had to make some real major adjustments 2 years ago. I was looking back. It was almost exactly like this weekend that we had to start shutting down. And you remember, it's like, I remember it vividly. The normal rhythms of life where I would get up in the morning and get in my car and drive to work, and you go to the grocery store, all the things you're accustomed to doing, suddenly all of that came screeching to a halt. And for days, and we thought it would only be maybe for a few weeks, it turned into months, which turned into years. We're having to be in isolation. And I can remember looking outside the window of our home and see people doing things they had never done before. I hadn't seen anybody ride a bicycle in my neighborhood before that happened. And then all of a sudden, all these people suddenly have bicycles, and they're riding all over the place, and they're walking and visiting on the porches. And it was just different. Life was different. We had to make an intentional pivot, an intentional change of the normal rhythms that we were accustomed to. Now again, that was challenging. It's always challenging to do something different than we're creatures of habit. An object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. And I want to tell you, now is the time to pivot again. And to get started, let me give you a few quick suggestions. I think Sunday afternoons are a phenomenal opportunity that many of us are not tapping into. We have, I think, a phenomenal worship gathering on Sunday mornings. We have great life groups and classes to follow. But man, Sunday afternoon is a great time here at Northside for us to recapture that time slot for an intentional purpose of connecting with other believers. Why not use Sunday afternoon as a time to form a discipleship group and meet with 3 or 4 other individuals, other men or other women, depending on your gender. Meet with them on Sunday afternoons and have time or in the Word together and praying with one another and discussing Scripture together. Or maybe Sunday afternoon is a great time to say, you know what, I'm going to get in the habit once a month, twice a month, maybe every week. I knew a family once before the pandemic that every single Sunday they prepared a meal. It's kind of a throwback. Some of you remember this. Every Sunday they would have a meal and invite people from the church over. I've known people doing that just in recent years. Maybe it's the time to reinvent that. And to have some people over in your home on Sunday afternoon, maybe for a dinner meal, and just invite people over. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be super simple. Grill some hot dogs and have people over. This Wednesday, we're going to start a brand new series of classes in the upper room. If you've not been in the habit of midweek Bible study, let me encourage you to get back in the habit, and this Wednesday is a great time to start. Because on Wednesday nights in the upper room, we're going to have a discussion of the relationship principles of Jesus. When we look to Jesus and what He taught and what He modeled, what are the principles that we can glean from His life and incorporate into our own lives to make our relationships better and stronger? We're going to look at that and discuss that together. And why not join us earlier? That starts at 6:30, but come an hour early and enjoy a fellowship meal that we'll have on our Wednesday night meals in the gymnasium prior to that. You can sign up on our Northside Nashville app by today or tomorrow to be a part of that meal. Or why not utilize our counseling center? For those of you that are visiting or just coming back, we are launching a brand new counseling center that are going to be a great resource for helping us process the avenues in our lives where we need to shore up some areas to have better and stronger marriages and relationships and friendships with others. Why not utilize that counseling center? There's information about that out in the foyer you can pick up. Or if you've not downloaded our Northside Nashville app, go to the App Store, go to the Google Play Store, and just search Northside Nashville and download our app. This morning on the front page of the app is a whole list of upcoming things happening, including the counseling center, that are available. And you can sign up for things, you can schedule things right there on the app. And by the way, the video that we saw at the beginning as we were visiting, some of you might, I wish I could have seen more of that. It's on the app. You can watch it from your smartphone even right now. Don't do it right now, but it's already there and it's ready. And by the way, something that the staff is planning for the fall, we don't have a solid date just yet, but for the fall, we're planning a marriage retreat. So we want to encourage any married couples that want to be a part of this marriage retreat that we're planning. So be watching for more details about that. It's a way to invest, again, in the relationships closest to you. So there's lots of great opportunities. But here's the thing. Whether or not you are intentional about re-engaging in relationships, it's on you. It's on you. It's your decision. Don't wait for others to try to invite you in. Take the initiative. Build relationship. Why? Because when you go through life, you're going to find, just like the writer of Ecclesiastes did, that life is better together.